Okay, we're returning to the architecture of the universe as source material. Again, the architecture of the universe is a funny book. The architecture of the universe contains within it an explanation using equations, something that most popularized science books don't do, explaining the theory of relativity. And he also mixes in it his own philosophy and his own theology. It's just a wonderful admixture. So, in the Urantia Book,
the super-universe of Orvonton is illustrated and is illuminated and warmed by more than 10 trillion blazing suns. These suns are the stars of your observable astronomic system. More than 2 trillion are too distant and too small ever to be seen from Urantia. But in the master universe, there are as many suns as there are glasses of water in the oceans of your world.
Now remember, master universe means the universe of all universes in the Urantia Book? Okay.
Architecture of the universe. But the great nebula of Andromeda is only one of the million such nebula, each a little universe of its own, bound to us in one great universe by those all-pervading messengers, the light photons, which bring the story of our neighbors to us. The number of stars in the grander universe is possibly about 10,000 million, 1 times 10 to the 22nd. In other words, there are about as many stars in the grander universe as there are glasses of water in all the oceans of the world.
So this is just one of the very, very, very clear borrowings that the Revelatory Commission made in inclusion in the Urantia Book. The only thing they didn't borrow was the term grander universe because they wanted to use the term master universe. But eventually, of course, they did use the term grand universe for another purpose. But note this figure. This is a very curious number of 1 times 10 to the 22 being arrived at in 1934. So this is a picture, this is a photograph that the Hubble Space Telescope made in 1996. So the Hubble Space Telescope was pointed at an area near the Big Dipper that seemingly had no previously discovered objects within it. It was the size of a grain of sand, but they pointed it there and left the telescope pointed there for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, we end up with this photograph, and it clearly contains many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of galaxies, tiny dwarf infant galaxies. Now, based on that photograph, expanded to the entire night sky, the Hubble Deep Field suggests that there are about 200 billion galaxies in the universe. Now, if each of those 200 billion galaxies has 50 billion stars, then we have exactly 1 times 10 to the 22 stars. Now, how in 1934 this guy came up with exactly the same number that was arrived at using the Hubble Space Telescope in 1996. How's that for interesting about the architecture of the universe and good old Swan? It is just one of these really fun things that you wonder what is driving people when they're writing and propelled to write as Swan did with the architecture of the universe. It is just extraordinary to me. The 200 billion number is a fun number. So if you think of any given galaxy as containing, 50, 100, 200 billion stars, think of that number of stars as being equivalent to the number of galaxies in the universe. So it's kind of a fun number to hold on to. The Great Attractor. The Great Attractor. We're nearing the end here. Observation.
Observation of the so-called Milky Way discloses the comparative increase in Orvonton's stellar density when the heavens are viewed in one direction, while on either side the density diminishes. The number of stars and other spheres decreases away from the chief plane of our material superuniverse. When the angle of observation is propitious, gazing through the main body of this realm of maximum density, you are looking toward the residential universe and the center of all things.
Earlier, when I showed some images of the Milky Way at night in Sagittarius, and if we had a nice dark place to observe from, and you could look into that milky band of light where Sagittarius is, the Urantia Book says that if you could look directly into and through that direction, you'd be looking toward the residential universe and the center of all things. So in the night sky, when we can see Sagittarius imagine, that at that point in time, if you're looking through that direction, you're looking through to the center of all things. Now it's very curious, very, very curious, that in the 1980s again, there's an object called the Great Attractor, and behind it the Shapley concentration. The Great Attractor and Shapley behind it represents the biggest, you could say the heaviest and most physically powerful point in all the universe documentable in these regions. It's drawing 1 million galaxies toward it, of which ours is one, and it's exactly in that direction that the Urantia Book says that we would be looking toward the center of all things. So again, here is an image in the night sky of, this is Sagittarius at night, so here, this is actually a gorgeous photograph if we could clearly see it. So we would be looking toward the maximum density toward the central universe, as well as toward the Great Attractor. Now we're returning finally to the same slide that we started with. In this slide, in the middle, is the Milky Way, surrounded by these colorized groupings of superclusters of galaxies. And note that there's a handful of them. And they are all in motion around this object right here called the Great Attractor. And again, the problem with really documenting the Great Attractor is that we have to look through the band of the Milky Way to say anything about it. And so it is very recent science that's been able to say much of anything about the Great Attractor. The problem with the Great Attractor in terms of science is that even though this huge variety of superclusters of galaxies is in motion around it, there is nothing in this region, like a supercluster of galaxies, for all these other superclusters of galaxies to be circling it. There really is nothing observable there. So what is it that's driving all this collection of superclusters of galaxies to move around the Great Attractor? We could call it the central universe. As Urantia Book readers, we can do that. So it's fun. It's really fun that the story of the Urantia Book contains within itself something suggestive of things that physics and astronomy have not quite observed yet. It doesn't make it true, but it's wonderful that it's there. Because really, for the last 15 years, the Urantia Book science guys have wondered if the Great Attractor might really have anything to do with the central universe. Well, we don't know. We may never know. But maybe as astronomy is better able to penetrate things using things like the Spitzer telescope and look in that direction, we'll be able to say more about it. But the Urantia Book does present that image of large-scale motion, which was not documentable back in the 1930s. And we have all these superclusters of galaxies. The Urantia Book talks about 7 superuniverses, and here we have a nice handful of superclusters, maybe super universes, in motion around the Great Attractor. So again, it's just a really, really glorious parallel. So what I want you to take away from this talk, and again in the upper right-hand corner we have our now familiar super universes in motion, superclusters in motion. So I want you again to learn to associate the term super universe with 1,000 minor sectors with a supercluster which contains about 1,000 galaxies. So there really are structures which astronomy sees which resemble what the Urantia Book says in its story about the universe. Our Milky Way is one minor sector. It's on the edge of the Virgo supercluster. And there are several of these superclusters in motion around the Great Attractor. So let go of your 21st century definitions of what a universe is, as well as your modern ideas of a galaxy, if you want to read the Urantia Book as it's written. Because the Urantia Book was not written with these understandings in use at that time. A universe of universes meant the same as a universe of galaxies or a universe of nebulae. And there was really only one master universe, the universe in today's terms. And again, I'm only suggesting a nice fit. This is just a wonderful fit. The Urantia Book presents a story that has a wonderful fit with modern astronomy. And it does make sense. The Urantia Book really does make sense in the view of modern astronomy. So returning to the final page, we began with the first page of the architecture of the universe, and we're ending with the final page of the architecture of the universe.
There is one great work of art. It is the universe. Ye men of letters, find the imprints of its majesty in your sense of the beauty of words. Ye men of song, find it in the harmony of sweet sounds. Ye lovers are conscious of its beauties in forms ye can but ill define. Ye men of science, find it in the rich harmonies of nature's mathematical design. And so, dear mortals, if you should pray for anything, pray that ye may find senses to which all nature's beauties bring response. For then ye be as angels, and heaven shall be your habitation.
Final page of the Architecture of the Universe, and the last slide for this talk.